My name is Angie Furman, and I'm the River Training Center Coordinator for River Management Society. And I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us today for the third discussion in our Braided Channels series. Today is about how opportunities relate to cultural and social priorities on public lands. Um, just a couple housekeeping items. There is a live transcript available. Again, as I mentioned, small group, we can be pretty conversational. So feel free to speak up, ask questions, unmute yourself. Um, However, if there is some feedback going, we just ask you to mute yourself when you're not speaking. Also, this is being recorded. We did have a couple people reach out and say that they wouldn't be able to make today, so they're hoping to catch this recording. And we post all the recordings from this discussion series on our video channel. I provided a link there, and I can also provide it into the chat. This discussion series, we've kind of aimed it towards our River Studies and Leadership Certificate students. And a little bit about the River Studies and Leadership Certificate is it's a certificate offered by several, right now I believe we've got 11 different partner schools and more joining every day, where you take a set of set curriculum of courses based around river management, policy, science, GIS, as well as like some on-water components. That in addition to an internship type experience, as well as presenting or writing an article for our journal, will get you a certificate in River Studies and Leadership from RMS. So if you're interested in learning more information about that, you're also welcome to send me a message or check out our website. I also just wanted to put it out there, some recent or upcoming opportunities that are going on, just to share the information and make sure you're aware. The Pathways internship, which we referenced heavily in our first discussion in this series, will be opening up soon. They're going to be posting jobs November 23rd through December 7th at usajobs.gov. And so encourage you to get your applications and resumes ready. Check that out. That's available for current students as well as student or recent graduates. So opportunities for both. Also, I know it's a short window, but we have until November 12th. There's some seasonal river trails and wilderness positions open on usajobs.gov, such as being a river ranger for the Bridger Teton National Forest. So encourage you to look into those types of opportunities, check out Facebook pages, job boards, things like that. And the Forest Service is also offering some upcoming webinars. You can find out more about these on their Forest Service jobs webpage. But these four webinars coming up are really about how to get your resume ready for usajobs.gov, because it is a little different, as well as different hiring eligibilities and qualifications and whatnot. So just want to make sure that those are on everyone's radar. Since we were talking about jobs and job boards, I also wanted to share Wilderness Connect has a page of listings. While they have some that aren't river related, to find the ones that are river related, you can look for the positions that have forestry technician and recreation next to it. Some of those tend to be river related. So this is a good place to check out jobs that are closing soon, or just keeping aware of what's out there. And then also just letting you know that we have a page on the RMS website as well for job seekers, where we post some permanent full-time and seasonal part-time positions, but also, which might be of particular interest to you, we have some information for graduate assistantships and fellowships as well. So we're always updating that. Encourage you to go check that out. All right. So today's webinar is about how opportunities relate to cultural and social priorities on public lands. And really happy to have both Tom O'Keefe here and Risa Shimoda here joining us. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. If anyone else has any experiences they'd like to share, please share those as well. I do have to mention we're supposed to have a couple other panelists joining us today from the Forest Service. Unfortunately, they were unable to, but we still thought it would be great to get together and discuss this and share some of those opportunities as well. So kind of want to just take a moment and maybe like have us introduce ourselves, go around and just share like who we are. And then I have some of these questions here that we'll do some reflecting on. But first, I'm going to pass it over to Tom. If you can introduce yourself, Tom.
Yeah, so my name's Tom O'Keefe. I'm the Pacific Northwest Stewardship Director for American Whitewater. We're a 501c3 river conservation organization that our mission is to preserve and conserve America's whitewater rivers and opportunities to enjoy them safely. So within that mission, we have a focus on conservation of rivers, but also providing access for people to be able to enjoy those rivers. And then we also have a focus on safety and safety education. So the work that I do here in the Pacific Northwest, I do a lot of conservation work on rivers impacted by dams. I live in a state, Washington State, that has more hydropower than any other state in the country. So I do a lot of work on hydropower. Also do a lot of conservation work through the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. And just by way of background, I have a PhD in aquatic ecology. I worked as a research scientist for several years at the University of Washington before, kind of slowly transitioning to what I do now, which is, full-time advocacy for rivers and river conservation. That's my background.
Thanks, Tom. Maybe Risa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Tom, you have big shoes to fill or shoes to come behind. So I'm Risa Shimoda. I'm the Executive Director of the River Management Society. We're based in Tacoma Park, Maryland, but our staff is in 4 different states. Our 4 people are in 4 different states. So like Angie, the other 2 are virtual, and our mission is to support professionals who study, manage, and protect North America's rivers. Our members are a little over half federal and state river administering agency folks, and the rest of the members are a variety of attorneys and scientists and students and professors and attorneys and kind of natural resource consultants. So there's a wide variety, but the common thread is moving water that's fresh, so rivers. And my background is I'm a kayaker, so that's the biggest part of my background, and avid kayaker. And then I have worked at American Whitewater and with engineers on developing and restoring rivers to rebuild them to be good for recreation, and marketing for as a kind of a brand development marketing person.
Awesome. Thanks, Risa. I don't know if anyone else would like to introduce themselves or share. You're more than welcome to unmute, or you can just tell us a little bit about yourself in the chat.
Sure. Hi, my name's Ginger. I am currently a intern on the Klamath River in Happy Camp. I've been here for almost 6 months through a program called Mobilize Green. So yeah, I've been out with, I don't know if anybody knows Dave Payne. He's been the river ranger out here for 40 years. So I've just been getting a lot of information and a lot of some job development stuff out here. I'm also a kayaker as well. I was a guide on the Trinity River for 5 years, and I recently just graduated from Chico State with a degree in environmental science applied ecology. So it feels really good to be using my degree and jumping into career. So yeah, that's pretty much my background. My goal is to become a river ranger full-time. So full-time, seasonal, permanent. So yeah, that's my background.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, Ginger. Chris, I don't know if you wanted to say anything. Well, I guess we can kind of start discussing these questions here. So, I mean, we know, like, we all understand what's been going on in the world in the last, in particular, like besides COVID, big focus on like diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, access, all these things. And so we'd like to know, we thought it would be interesting to look at how the social and cultural priorities, those like in addition to like climate change, other things going on, how they are impacting job opportunities and kind of what people are doing and the work that's being done around them. So I guess can open it up. How are social and cultural priorities being applied within your organization?
Yeah, so I'm happy to just launch into a couple of things that I've been thinking about and that are on my mind. And, certainly as a member of society right now, a lot of things happening in the world and a lot of opportunity for self-reflection on, the work that we do and thinking about these issues of, diversity and equity and inclusion and social justice issues. And I think it's led many of us to think about like, okay, we have a DEI statement on our website, but what does that mean? And how can we translate some of this into action and think about how we apply some of these principles that we identify as important to the work that we do. So here at American Whitewater, I'll just kind of highlight a few things that have been areas of focus for us here recently. So the first is our relationship and our work with tribes, and particularly here on the West Coast where I live and in the Pacific Northwest, we have federally recognized tribes. Some of those tribes have treaty rights to fishery and aquatic resources, and oftentimes the goals that we have for river conservation can align with the goals that tribes have. And in many cases, it's hard to imagine, in the rivers that I work on, any other entity that has been more directly impacted from a social justice perspective in terms of impacts that we've seen to our rivers. And I think about, if any of you've been following the news on the Klamath was mentioned, this series of dams that were constructed on the Klamath River system with significant social justice impacts associated with those a century ago. I was very involved in the Elwha dam removal, and that dam was constructed and inundated the creation site for lower Elwha Clallam tribe, the Condit Dam on the White Salmon River in the homeland of the Yakima Indian Nation, I'm currently engaged in a project right now on the Skagit River. The city of Seattle derives the majority of its hydropower from a couple of projects in Washington State. One of those projects is on the Skagit River, was the primary original source of electricity for the city of Seattle. Still provides a major contribution to our electricity here in the city. And people are starting to ask the question of that hydropower was constructed over 100 miles away on the Skagit River system, a series of dams that now blocks and impacts 40% of the Skagit River watershed. There are a number of tribes there, Upper Skagit Indian tribe, Sauk-Suiattle tribe, and the Swinomish tribe that, that watershed and the headwaters are their homeland. And, no one asked them 100 years ago. And I think it's appropriate to ask the question of, okay, this project has had a huge benefit for the city of Seattle, but, for whose benefit and at whose cost is the question that I think we can start to ask. And so, originally when I started doing this work in hydropower licensing 20 years ago, I think, a lot of the discussion was about aquatic ecosystem effects and impacts and mitigating or addressing them. But the social justice impacts of these projects has become much more forefront in the discussion. And for those of you who may read, High Country News, there was recently an article on this topic on the Skagit River here recently. But that's one area where, just sort of looking at this question of cultural and social priorities and thinking about it in the work that I do in hydropower licensing. So that's been one area. The second one I was going to mention was equitable access to rivers. And, are we creating inviting spaces that are accessible and welcoming to all? And I think, a lot of times when I work on a river access project and facilitating access to a waterway, I've traditionally thought about it through the lens of, how does the whitewater kayaker get there and get their boat to the river's edge? But as I've done some of these projects over the years, what I've observed is, these areas where we facilitate access for people to carry a boat to the water can become gathering places and, places where people congregate and are able to enjoy that contact access to the water. So whether it's, just enjoying the view or, skipping rocks or having a picnic, thinking about in the work that we do to develop access to waterways, thinking about how we can do that in a way that encourages inviting and welcoming spaces that are accessible to all. And then the third thing that I just wanted to reflect on in terms of social priorities is just the composition and makeup of the individual, the individuals who engage in the activities that that I do along rivers. And let's call it what it is. It's not a very diverse spectrum of the population. And so thinking about what are the systems in place that that are responsible for that, and how do how can we work to address that? So that's another area, and I've got a couple of more thoughts here on some of the specifics on some of these questions, but maybe I'll just sort of pause there for a moment. But those are kind of just specific areas that we've been thinking about. How do we apply some of these principles, where we've had a lot of high level discussions about, and just sort of think about how we integrate those into our project work.
Yeah.
I've got more, but I just want to pause and see if there's questions, or if you have thoughts, Risa or
Yeah,
Andrew.
I can share a couple. One thing I want to mention, on your point, and so my perspective, or our perspective at RMS, because we're not really an advocacy organization, but our members include folks like Tom and others, and lots of agency folks, like I mentioned. So we see and are part of conversations with them. So some of my comments are more reflections of what our members are doing, experiencing, seeing, and so forth. On the access, one thing that's very interesting is kind of it's not cross purposes, but sort of schizophrenia about wanting to acknowledge underserved communities, however that's defined, and wanting to create more access. And it might change with new budgets and so forth, but having limited capacity to accept them and to welcome them. So we want everybody to come, but then it's too crowded, so we don't want all of them to come. We'd like some of them to come. So I think some of the agencies, state, local, federal, are struggling with that. And in particularly in areas that have been viewed as kind of wilderness, small w, places that have traditionally been pretty, quiet in the country. Those who are seeking solitude go there, and now there's a crowd, and people are sad because they have to share these beautiful places with a ton of other people. So that's just like something that has emerged as an issue that's not just in cities. And I think the agencies are trying to come to terms with it to figure out how they're going to accommodate folks. This is another quite different type of priority that's bubbled up in the last couple of years. One of our members works for the Department of Conservation and Recreation for the state of Virginia. And he's been asked to work on a lot of kind of equity and what can we do about past injustice kinds of projects. And 3 or 4, maybe 4 now of his projects have been addressing unattended or abandoned cemeteries, 3 of which are on rivers, are on beautiful sites. And some of them have been buried, so nobody knew they were there, or they've been just overgrown, for a long time. So identifying that they're there, often next to a cemetery that's pristine, has beautiful flowers and stuff, but it's the white people over here, black people over here. And then one, which is most horrifying, was there was a state senator who decided he needed to improve his kind of waterfront area on his property. And when he went down there, he discovered that some of the riprap was old headstones. So it was on the news, and it was just identifying it, dealing with the families that belong to those headstones and so forth, is a project for the state. And there's one, so just this stuff is happening, but the fact that they're working on it is significant. And then the last one we heard, and this again in Virginia, just last week, a private donor came in and purchased some land on which an old cemetery had been found in a state of disarray, to protect it, and they're going to give it to the state to take care of. So that work is new. I mean, having someone focus on it, so that's been pretty awesome. I would say there, in general, on this first question, it's tough to apply new priorities. I think that the larger the agency, the more it's the case that the questions have forced, encouraged, promoted the discussion about what to do. So like the Park Service has had these or DOI has had these listening sessions, 3 of them in the past month, just listening to the public. And I've listened in on 2 of them, and they're just listening, so it's to be determined exactly what they do, but I think they're trying to reconcile or integrate these, behemoth practices, policies, things that have been in place for a long time, with this very vocal, I wouldn't say urgent, but very vocal and appreciated voice for people, places, practices that have been kind of either ignored or downplayed, or who that have not been given a voice. So I think time will tell, but I think the more there's a voice, and the not the louder, the more consistent and sustained the voice is for challenging status quo, the more there can be change. I think that it won't turn back, and this is not a fad.
If there's no questions, I mean, we can move on to the next. Or Tom, you had some more thoughts?
Well, kind of on the next one. So
okay. So I have a question, and it might. I'll just ask it now. But I guess for both of you, since you've been in this like industry for a while, or like river related careers for a while, how have you seen like a change? Like Tom, you kind of mentioned a change like on the dam removal products from projects from like aquatic focus to now more social focused. I guess I'm curious how that has changed, or if there's been a change in the types of job positions that are involved in the projects. So like, I don't know, like, are they hiring more like anthropologists or sociologists, or like, what are those positions that they're kind of, I don't know, what is the position that you're seeing more and more now on these projects?
I mean, good question. And it's been a while since I've, paid a lot of attention to the job market, but I can say what I've observed just in terms of the need, expertise, and skill sets. So I would say, in the past, a lot of the work that I'm doing and involved in, being able to come in with a technical science or engineering background was really key, and that was where most of the discussion and focus was, and need for technical expertise was that existed. But more and more what I'm seeing is that skill set is really important, but just thinking about the integration of science, and decision making in a science-based framework with the social implications of the actions that we're taking, needing to be much more understood and recognized. And so I think, if I'm considering, what are the skill sets that would be useful in entering the kind of work that I do, and and the work that I'm doing, it involves, there's individuals like myself that work for non-governmental organizations. There are people who work for federal agencies or state agencies that are charged with management and natural resources. So in Washington State, we have a Department of Fish and Wildlife, and we have a Department of Ecology, and then we have, NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service, and the Fish and Wildlife Service, and Forest Service and Park Service, depending on the project. So you have these federal resource agencies and individuals coming in with traditionally have had a lot of technical expertise from sort of a hydrology, ecology, fisheries science background. But more and more it feels to me like being able to bring in a skill set that also where you can demonstrate an understanding of the social implications of decisions that we're making, and understand how those fit in a decision framework, I think is a really important skill set to be able to bring to the table, and to something I would emphasize if I was if I felt I had that breadth of training and was entering into this world.
Cool.
So I thought.
And then I guess, Risa, I don't know, have you seen like a change in the types of members that are members of RMS like over the years, or has it stayed pretty consistent? I don't know if that would be any indication, but I'm just curious.
Right. No, it's changed a bit. And what's both interesting and kind of sometimes a little bit frustrating, but also good, but for a good reason, is that maybe 15 or 20 years ago, the cry would have been for more women. We need some women in these jobs. Well, there are lots of women in these jobs now. They were definitely the outliers, say, 20 years ago. But I don't know the percentage of women versus men, say, in a river ranger or manager's position, but if you add the planners, for sure. So women are doing, they're well represented, and that concept was limited by the universe that whoever was saying that, was considering. So even if the workforce now was half women and half men, it's still very homogeneous in terms of other kinds of attributes, whether it's race, gender, diverse, other kinds of diversity. So progress has been made, and I think those who are now asking for additional change or would like to incorporate other needs relative to public lands to the skill sets or familiarity or awareness among those who are working, it's changed. That the bar got raised really high in 2 years. That's changed, I think. So I don't think that's bad. I think it's good, because it should have been inching up all these for the last 40 years, and it hasn't. So I think it's good, and all the change again if it's caused every organization, hiring manager, HR person to ask, what do we need to do, then that's good. I think so. Oh, and what I'd say for the impact, how does it impact the work you do? One thing that we're pretty excited about is since last summer, where we were asking ourselves and looking at our very white membership, and not just our members, but those in the river management community. And because we're not DEI experts and didn't want to even get close to trying to, portray ourselves as such, we were starting from the beginning as well with this journey. We've been holding river management roundtables. So every month we have two. One is kind of on more operational stuff like permits and capacity and user conflicts, and the other is on something related to workplace culture. So we've hosted them on identity and identifying your voice. We've talked about code switching. We've talked about things that can be pretty personal. So we don't record them. We don't post the recording, but they've been helpful, I think, for people to have conversations that are sometimes pretty tough, and acknowledge that people are approaching this topic with varying degrees of confidence. Some people don't want to talk about it because it makes them nervous, and some people want to talk all about it because nobody at work will talk about it, or they would like to create change, and in their organization they're afraid that they'll not be viewed positively because they want to drive change. So those kinds of conversations are tough, but they're going on, and hopefully we're helping people kind of develop some tools to go back to their organization and make a little bit of headway.
And I will just take a quick moment to plug the next River Management Roundtable is going to be on November 23rd. And you can find out more information. I just put a link in the chat. And we're going to be actually hosting the A- Collaborative, which stands for Anti-Discrimination and Sexual Harassment. Also priorities on public lands right now and everywhere, right? So the A- Collaborative is a group of trainers, river companies, different people that have spent time on rivers who are all working to end sexual harassment and discrimination. So if you'd like to know more, it's going to be a pretty informal conversation with the A- Collaborative, some of the trainers, some of the members, to just get to know a little bit more about some of the work that they're doing, that they offer for both nonprofits, individuals, agencies, and whatnot. But yeah, I'm curious, Tom, for you, that kind of to our question, how does it impact the work that you do?
Yeah, so a couple things that I've kind of alluded to, but in the realm of hydropower licensing, and just to back up for a moment there, in this country, hydropower licenses are issued for a term of 30 to 50 years, and at the end of that term, the licensee, whether it be a public utility, a private utility, or other entity that owns and operates the project, they have to seek a new license. And that's a 5 to 6 year process that they go through that includes studies of project impacts, and then slowly evolves into what are called protection, mitigation, and enhancement measures that have to give, quote, equal consideration to power and non-power values. And so it's, if you have this license for the privilege of being able to use a river, a public resource, to extract water from that resource and use it for the generation of hydroelectricity, there's certain measures that you have to put in place. And I feel like, whereas historically I may have been looking predominantly at the ecosystem impacts of that project and the actions, we're taking, I would argue, a much more holistic view as we evaluate the impacts and develop the protection, mitigation, and enhancement measures. So that's one area of my work. And then on the access front, thinking about making design choices that serve not only those who have an interest in putting a boat in the river, but everyone that wants to be able to come and utilize that resource. So those are a couple of the areas. But I also wanted to highlight a couple of legislative efforts that are underway. And traditionally my engagement in federal legislation has often been on the conservation front, designation of new wild and scenic rivers, protected areas. But there's been a few pieces of legislation that I might not have been involved in these types of efforts 5 years ago, but just reflective of some of the changes that we've seen in society, and applying that to the work that I do and thinking about how that impacts it. I just want to highlight a couple of these. So one of them is the Outdoors for All Act. So in the House, that's HR 5413. In the Senate, it's S 2887. Establishes the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Program, which would provide grants and funding both for acquisition and renovation of parks and open spaces, including those that are along rivers, and puts a priority on creating experiences and opportunities that empower underserved communities, provide employment and job training opportunities for youth or underserved communities, and establish partnerships and take advantage of opportunities for coordination. So that's just sort of one example of what's happening in Congress right now. Another one is the Reconciliation and Place Names Act. That was a piece of legislation that in the last Congress was a priority for Deb Haaland, who's currently Secretary of Interior. And I know that she holds the priorities that were part of that legislation very near and dear, and it's something she's committed to now in her role in the administration. Others have taken up the bill in Congress. In the Senate, it's S 2400, and in the House, it's H 4454. So the Reconciliation and Place Names Act would establish an advisory committee on reconciliation and place names that would advise the Board on Geographic Names on names that are geographic place names that use derogatory terms, racial, sexual stereotypes targeting Native Americans, African Americans, and others. Would also address place names that honor individuals who held racially repugnant views, committed atrocities against Native Americans, or supported or effectuated discriminatory policies. So, and that's something that on rivers there are a lot of features and place names along rivers, and one of the things I've learned in the work that I've been doing is just this has come up on the Klamath River as an example, and some other places down on the San Joaquin River in California, but there are place names and feature names that are offensive to various groups and individuals, and having a willingness to acknowledge that and try and help change those is something I've found that it's just been a tremendous avenue for building partnership and effective relationships with other people that I work with. So we're a very small organization, as whitewater paddlers, and to the extent that I can build relationships with others who care about rivers and value the experiences that rivers provide, even if it's not whitewater paddling, but other uses and experiences that people have around rivers, and part of creating these welcoming, inviting spaces, creating inviting and welcoming spaces is ensuring that we have place names that aren't targeting or offensive to a particular group. So that's I just present that as an example of place names was not something I had really thought of 5 years ago, but it's something I've learned a little bit about, and in listening to individuals in various communities where that affects them, and thinking about how we can work together on some legislative advocacy is something that's so that's been one where just think about the impacts on my work, and like how do I prioritize the time and capacity that I put into work that we do with members of Congress and their staff in terms of prioritizing federal legislation. So there's just a few things. We'll pause there.
Are there any questions about any of this from anyone? I guess we've kind of touched a little on it, but I don't know if we want to directly answer how might like a student or someone who's for example, in some of these discussions, we have students or graduate students who are trying to focus their graduate research work on a certain topic that will be relevant, that can help focus on some of these social and cultural priorities while they're still in school, but then also help lead them into a relevant job afterwards. I don't know if either of you have any ideas. Yeah, go ahead, Risa.
Today is so different. Can you hear me? Am I muted? Okay.
Yep, you're good.
Today is so different than even 10 years ago, maybe for sure 20 years ago, where if you're going to make a case or set up a problem solution or recommend a new model or framework for some system, you had to have the data, you had to have some precedent or something like that. Unless you were doing a PhD project, then maybe you could come up with something new, brand new and earth-shattering. But today, it seems that every person's story counts. If what you're saying is relevant to your audience, every person's story counts. So if as a student, if you saw a system that somehow didn't seem right and you wanted to make the case for a change, that would be, I think, a wonderful basis for a paper. If you see something that, you know, good, bad, or indifferent, there is such a dearth of connections between cultural and social priorities and ways systems work. Most of them don't align well. So there's so many places where there is non-alignment. It seems like there's almost an infinite opportunity to contribute with a story that you view as true or relevant that can help make a difference. How you apply that to a potential job, you know, you might have to narrow from the infinite number of stories that you could tell to one that's related to a certain type of activity or a certain Native American tribe or, you know, a certain river, what you see happening or not happening with the river. But I'd say if there's evidence and some precedent or a story behind it and your interest, and even better, you're passionate about a project, I'd say that's a project. That's a project in a paper. And I think that would be well received if you kind of align those up.
I have a couple thoughts and ideas, just things that I was brainstorming here and could be further refined, but just in the interest of just kind of coming up with some ideas. So we've retained the services of a firm in California, Native American led firm that's involved in education and providing education on Native American narratives. And so one of the things we've been doing is we've just picked out 5 river systems in the state of California, and in our case we've hired a firm to do this, but you know, someone could certainly work on this as a project for their river, and trying to develop the native narrative and story about that place and that river, and putting it in a format that it can be accessible to those who use the river corridor and experience the river corridor. One of the things that I've learned is cultural erasure of, you know, Native American connections that are, you know, both past and current to rivers where we recreate is a big issue, and simple acknowledgement of that can be a big deal, and the opportunity to forge a relationship. So that's something that we've been doing in some different places, and I would love to do it in more. And you know, we sort of have a limited budget, and we're just, you know, working on a few river systems to start, but there's certainly a wealth of opportunity to investigate, explore that in other places. And I think about you know, people who are maybe, you know, starting out in their careers with river management, and you know, kind of, you know, maybe working in a capacity as a river ranger, and kind of starting out on one river system, but having some intellectual curiosity to think about and learn and become exposed to some of those Native American narratives in that place where you work. I mean, I think it's a great place to start. There's some real opportunities there.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Chris asked if you could share the name of the firm.
Oh, so we're working with Redbud Resource Group, and they're down, I can't remember exactly where they're based, but somewhere in that, you know, kind of Northern California zone. And a couple of the rivers we're working on are the San Joaquin and the Feather River system. So so that's one one thought. I think there's some interesting opportunities there. There's also been some great research and that's been done. I know on the Klamath River system, I've seen some of it on access to traditional food sources and more recently, lack of access to some of those traditional food resources and what it means for diet and health. And so, anyone that's interested in the field of nutrition and connections to rivers and traditional food sources, the importance of salmon and its contribution to diet and health can't be overstated in this region where I live, and that's an area that's of interest and active area of research. I think there's some interesting questions about access to the outdoors. A lot of us get our first experiences in the outdoors through close to home opportunities. And there's been some interesting GIS work that I know that's been done looking at proximity to parks and open spaces for different neighborhoods and how that affects development of connection to experiences and opportunities in the outdoors. So there's certainly some interesting projects and research opportunities in that space. So I don't know, those are a few ideas that come to mind. I'm just sort of like brainstorming here.
I've seen some interesting projects coming out about, like you were mentioning, user experiences and using like social media apps, not only to like educate and connect people to the resource before they even get out there, but also to like help collect information about those experiences to better inform policies and management actions.
Yeah.
We only have a few minutes left, so I do want to open it up and see if there's any other questions. You can unmute or you can put them in the chat and I can read them out.
Feel free to chime in, but if there's nobody else talking, I'll share a story that's more urban and East Coast. That's sort of my perspective, but to on the topic of research. If you see something or read about something or hear, maybe not so much read about, but hear a presentation or maybe hear a podcast or something about something that seems of interest, there may well not be research written. There might not be a paper on that topic. You might be hearing from an expert or someone who's been around a long time. And one case is I live on a tributary of the Anacostia River, which comes into DC from the eastern side. And this last spring, COVID spring, there was a big announcement, and that there was the closing of the last outfall, raw sewage outfall in the river. So there had been almost a dozen of them in this river, and now it's being piped underneath and going to a wastewater treatment plant. But the story behind the way all of the DC area's poop was piped was from the design from 1900, 1910 of the downtown area, the beautiful Washington Mall. So, and the Potomac River, the nation's river. So poop was piped over to this one particular river where it happened to be where all the African-American people live, from as far away, Tom, you would understand this, as Dulles Airport. That's how far away they have piped the poop, almost 40 miles. So it was all getting dumped into the Anacostia River at one point. So that story was embraced by a group called Anacostia Watershed Society, who has done an unbelievable job cleaning it up to where their goal is a swimmable Anacostia a couple of years from now, so they're almost there. But that story exists in lots of PowerPoints, but it doesn't exist in a comprehensive review of this whole history, which would be an amazing document to go through, how it happened, all the decisions that had to be made relative to racial injustice. And then people came in, finally started working on it to fix it.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. Crazy.
Well, I don't know if there's any last thoughts from you, Tom or Risa.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you both. Thank you to everyone who came today. And just a reminder, we're going to be having our last discussion in this Braided Channels career series about leveraging education certifications and special skills. And that's going to be on December 2nd, same time. You can register for that on the RMS website, and I can also put a link here in the chat. But yeah, just want to say thanks again to everyone. And if there's nothing else, then I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.